All right, you're listening to Being Built. I'm Aaron Davis, the founder of Reckless Tech. We're an executive search and tech staffing firm here with Dan Bowerman. Broerman.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
right. Here with Dan
Why don't you
Broerman.
do it again? I shouldn't have interrupted. It's just.
No, you should have.
No. It's
Broerman.
Yes.
Broerman.
And like I said, and don't worry, I will. I when I know people, I try to help them.
Please do. Thank you so much.
No.
I'm here with Dan Broerman.
Yes.
He is the VP of software development and kind of a portfolio manager for Taylor Healthcare and the software division, the technology division of Taylor Healthcare. And tell us a little bit more about that.
Probably easiest to start at the top.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
And go down.
Because it's a big
Yes,
organization, right?
Yes. So Taylor Corporation is a multi-billion-dollar organization, has over 10,000 employees, privately held and owned by Mr. Glenn Taylor. He's got a really interesting wide portfolio, but we'll kind of zoom in on the Taylor Corporation piece. He's got the Timberwolves and the Lynx that he's selling to A-Rod and that organization.
Okay, so he's a bit of a mutual fund. Huh?
Yeah, he's got farmland and pork bellies and all kinds of stuff. Taylor Corporation's really mainly a communications company. And there's about 80 different organizations inside of Taylor, 80 different independent companies, primarily again in the communication space, with a real emphasis on print. That's where kind of he had his foundation. He started with a printing company that did wedding invitations. Okay. So now if you look at what Taylor can bring to the fold, it's really anything that can be printed. And you'd be shocked how much can be printed and is still being printed today. You walk into a store and you look around and you see all kinds of labels and signs and price tags and, marketing materials and window stickers. We do all that kind of stuff. And
true.
Yeah,
we
do.
think we're a digital age, but I got a desk full of stuff.
Exactly. And we do a lot of secure documents. So prescription pads, checks, lottery tickets, gift cards, all of that stuff's printed. A lot of marketing materials and promotional items. So we also get into branded collateral and promo things like shirts, pens, notebooks, all of that kind of stuff that you would want to hand out right alongside of a brochure. We provide and we can sell.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's a really neat, large portfolio at that large corporation level. Taylor Healthcare is a multi-million-dollar organization, kind of in the hundreds of millions. And they take that power of Taylor and all of those capabilities and knowledge of the healthcare space and will sell all of those capabilities into healthcare organizations.
Okay.
I'm part of Taylor Healthcare Technology, that next step down. And we write and sell software to mainly hospital systems.
Okay, so mostly the provider network.
Mostly, in the provider space. And we've got a portfolio of different solutions where we sell the software and have the services and everything associated with the software.
Gotcha. Okay. And then we began to speak a little bit yesterday when we had a chance to chat about your own portfolio of products that your team manages. And it's kind of threefold, right?
Right.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
so I'm responsible for actually building the products. We've got people, I'll say upstream, that are responsible for talking to the market, building out the roadmap, the product management group.
Okay.
And then we've got another organization that we give the product to that implements it at our customer sites. So client services organization, project managers, implementation, support.
Makes sense.
I have kind of the product owners, so managing the backlog, the development, the QA, and then the DevOps organization to actually deploy it into any of our hosted environments.
Okay, so you guys are the engineers, the ones building it.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like you said, we've got kind of 3 different portfolio or groups of items inside of my portfolio and my team. The first is IMED Consent. And IMED Consent is an informed consent application. So anytime a provider does any sort of a procedure, they have to get your consent. They need to make sure you understand what the procedure is, what the risks, the benefits, the alternatives are. And that for small things, that's a pretty easy discussion. We're going to take a biopsy. It's going to be, a punch biopsy. We're going to send it to the lab. You may get an infection. And everybody that's listening probably has heard that kind of a discussion from a doctor before.
That one caught my attention because I saw you share something on social media about it. And there's a lot of liability concern from the provider organizations, like have communicated everything that needs to be communicated? Do they really understand the critical things that need to be understood in this procedure? And me or somebody in my family were going through some kind of healthcare thing at the time when I saw that. And it just occurred to me, have we considered all of the, downstream implications of this procedure? And at a point in time in your life when you have a lot of things to think about, just the logistics of a procedure and just who's watching my kids and who's picking me up that day and whatever else, then somebody's telling you about these third degree impact things on a form, and have I thought and read through all these things,
think
right?
about it, right?
Yeah, so you do need kind of a thorough check, right?
Right.
And make sure that they've all been accounted for.
And there's a lot of different complicating factors in that as well. Because like you said, I mean, we're both fairly educated people and, but we've got busy lives. And so you're paying attention and you're in it when you're talking to the doctor. But at the same time, you're thinking about, like you said, logistics and, when can I get this done? What can I get it done? And having to worry about that. But you add a factor like English as a second language.
Oh, wow.
And there's stories, the one that kind of hit home for me most, having kids, was this woman sued a provider because she had a hysterectomy and didn't understand that she wasn't going to be able to have children.
Wow.
And I mean, and if you think about that and that kind of life-changing impact, this informed consent conversation is just critical. So in a lot of cases when it's a major surgery, the doctors will have this discussion not once, not twice, but over a series of things. Like when they, and again, if you've been unfortunate enough to have gone through this or someone that you love goes through this, the discussion tends to start with something like, well, this may be something that we have to do in the future, and this is kind of what it looks like. And then the doctor goes, yeah, it's kind of looking like this is what we're going to have to do. And then there's that last discussion where it's, here's what we're doing, here's what the risks, here's the form. What we do to help with this discussion is we have the software that the provider can pull up that has the description of the procedure, the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, all of that laid out for them. We also have a library of over 4,000 different procedures that our content team curates with board certified professionals in each of the different specialties that we support. It's all written at, I believe it's a 6th grade reading level, so that we can do our best to try to get to something that everybody can understand and it's not medical jargon, and you're giving that doctor the terminology and the information they need to make sure they've explained it well to that person. We provide everything in English and in Spanish so that, again, that language barrier for a lot of people can be eliminated or at least helped. And then the doctor is able to have that discussion. And that's the important part, the physician explaining it. But then they capture that fact of what they discussed in our application. It can be that they capture their signature, the patient's signature. It's sent on to the medical record, and it's part of that medical record. What I think the really cool part is, and not all of our customers do this, but some do, is they then either go and feed that into the PHR, the personal health record, so that the patient can pull up that document and read it, or they print it out and they hand it to the person. And then it becomes an education piece, because again, it's written for you at your, at a reasonable reading level. You're not going to Dr. Google and, trying to... I think this is what he's doing or she's doing. She talked to me about this procedure in this way. It's my risks, my, description, and you really know what you're
when you're laying there with your paper robe on and your underwear and your socks and your phone's already in the bag with your clothes or whatever before the procedure, and they hand you the paper you just signed, like, what else are you going to do but look at it anyway, right? So
exactly.
if you skimmed through it and signed it, at least then you're starting to read it again. So that's a good thing. What I like about what you're doing is you're reducing the barriers to communication, right?
Exactly.
You're kind of reducing the reading level required to comprehend. When I think about contracts, a lot of times people think about contracts as a CYA move, right?
Right.
And you have to. That's the nature of them. That's what they are for. But what you guys are doing too is also intentionally provoking the conversation, using them to provoke and encourage a conversation. And I do that with my contracts with my customers.
Right.
I do executive search, and I intentionally make my contracts as short as I possibly can without being irresponsible. My contracts are a page and a half. That's on purpose. And I never go to court, but I do engage in conversations with every single one of my customers.
Right.
and I cover the things I absolutely have to cover. And I try to make it the things that I intentionally want to have conversations about: payment terms, how I do business, that kind of thing. Right. And so if these are things I can't talk about, right, in the same way with your patients, right, they should be things that you're intentionally saying, oh, we should talk about that. Oh, we should talk about that. If there's so many details that you can't talk about it and it's just there to go to court, you're almost intentionally not doing what it's intended to do,
Right.
which is communicate.
Exactly. And that's where it ties into that kind of overall Taylor world of, being a communications company. And it ties back to, if you think about it, you do need that signature. Ultimately, you need that legal document for the hospital, for the physician, like you said, as a shield. But if you
that's how the doctor stays in business when they're 60, not just when they're 40.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because if you talk to anybody in the malpractice industry, they'll tell you every physician at some point in time will get sued. It's not if, it's when. That's an important part of it. But I think the really important piece is that communication and that education and getting that 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that used to be, one page, very generic, hand scrawled stuff on it that you can never read, right? And I have horrible writing, so I'm not, knocking anybody else. 8.5 by 11, white piece of paper that gets scanned and thrown into a medical record and forgotten about. Just something that can be a continuing education piece, making sure that the physicians are speaking to the patients at a good level and in a good way.
So that's the IMED.
That's the IMED consent product.
IMED consent product. So what are the others?
So the next one to kind of talk about is our Checkin application. You go to a doctor's office and that first time, and they inevitably hand you that clipboard and they say, here, go to the corner and, fill out all of these forms. And you write the same information on the form over and over again, your name, your address, your phone number. You sit there and you kind of grumble to yourself because you're going, they already have this, they're part of the same network. My doctor gave them this information. Why aren't they giving it to me? And it's really not a good experience for anybody. Right. And if you think about the downstream processing, that handwritten information, again, horrible handwriting guy, hands that to the registrar, and they have to type all that information into a computer system that then gets sent out to the other systems in the hospital. So what we do is we interface with those hospital systems. We get the patient data that they have. We populate that onto electronic forms, and then you're handed a tablet or you're texted a link where you can go fill out the forms on your phone. And you can go and you fill out the forms. You sign them all again electronically. You do need that legal documents still. And that data and those forms then get disseminated out to the other hospital systems.
Okay.
So you've moved. You type in your new address once and it populates on all of our forms, and it populates out to all of the other systems inside of the hospital or the physician's office.
So you've reduced the chance for errors and you've improved the patient experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and you've streamlined that process so that now, when the registrar gets handed back the tablet or gets told, okay, I'm done, they might have to, depending on the hospital's policy, review that information quickly, but
confirm it or
exactly,
whatever.
You didn't sign Mickey Mouse,
right.
Right. But, other than that, it's all there, it's all ready to be sent out, and you're moved through that process much faster.
Yeah, all the needle pokes and whatever else that you experience in a hospital, nothing is more painful than having to repeat your address and your on 4 different forms in the same office. Isn't it the most obnoxious thing?
It is the most obnoxious thing.
Oh, that's a great improvement to the whole experience in healthcare.
I'll never forget one of the customers that was a development partner with us when we were first building this out. We flew out to visit them, and they had a bunch of people from their organization there. And the sponsor got up and said, we were in a different facility than anybody was in. And they got up and they said, hey, for this place, there's some paperwork we got to fill out. So, here, let me pass this out. 5 documents that had, your name, your car's license plate number, the color of your car, another one that was, I agree to abide by all of the legalese of
Right,
for the
right.
facility. I think a lunch order form, some other
All
stuff.
the critical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were going to be there all day.
Sure.
And he hands them all out and everybody's spending, 10, 15 minutes, and you're writing your name again and talking to each other. What's the color of my car? Does anybody have an idea what the rental car's
What do you
license
call that
plate
gray
number
brown
is?
color? Yeah.
And we pass them all in and he goes, everything except the lunch form was a joke. He goes, it was just to try to give everybody in the right mindset of what our patients go through and what a pain in the neck it is when,
wow.
and you sit there and you go, you don't think about it, but we were there for a business meeting. I mean, stressed in a way, but not like you are if you're going for something major in healthcare. And we're sitting here going, that was brilliant, because it got you in the right mindset and it really did make you start thinking about what you needed to do and how you needed to improve.
Oh man, what a missed opportunity. So I used to run talent acquisition for a multi-billion-dollar company. And I used to fight with the C-suite, a couple of folks in particular, about the length of our application. I think it was 19 pages at one point. And of course I wanted it to be one page, right? I wanted it to just be submit your resume here,
right?
Like, I wanted
like
no
here,
application,
done.
right? I wanted to be friends with them before I even asked them to. You need an application at a big firm because it kind of serves as a legal document at some point too.
Absolutely.
As well. So you need a few box checked in a large organization when you're employing somebody. So you do need a few critical things, but I wanted to super reduce that just for the employee experience, the onboarding experience or whatever, to appeal to talent, right?
Yeah.
I should have made them go through something like that. Right? I should have held a meeting and like taunted them with an application process but they probably would have ate it up too much. They were into paperwork. I think in their dreams, while they were wearing suits, they would fill out paperwork. Different kinds of people, man.
Yes.
But the world needs all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The world needs all of us. I was out there taking the hill, and they were back there doing paperwork. But anyway. Well, yeah, that's interesting. That's a cool way to do it, though.
I thought
Get
it was
into
brilliant.
the mind of your customer, right?
Exactly. I thought it was brilliant, and it really, like I said, all of us have been that patient in a doctor's office filling out those forms, but it really drove it home when you were sitting here just going, what was this? What was I doing?
Yeah. Was anybody running out to the parking lot?
Yeah, nobody did that, luckily, but it was funny, and this was the other thing that
I've done that, like checking into a hotel. Do they make you write your license plate?
Yeah,
somebody does.
Some of them do, and
they're like, are you really going to look? Why do you really need that?
I've got a rental car.
Right.
So, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, it was, like I said, I wish I could take credit for it. It was a genius move on their part. It really drives home that pain and what we really help with there.
We were talking yesterday too about, I think when we were sharing a drink, we were talking a little bit about using your own device versus using the office's device, being a difference maker as well with that product.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Well, that product and the iMed Consent product both have the ability to text to the patient or the provider to have them use their own device in the iMed Consent world to sign in the Checkin world in order to complete the whole form.
When I got these glasses, I appreciated that very much because I sat in an office and I had to complete something and they started to hand me a tablet. They're like, you can use this or you can do it on your phone. And I was like, on my phone, please. And there was other people in the office and it just looked filthy.
Yep.
I don't know why it looked filthy. You know why it was? It's because it had one of these like rubber bumpers around it. It looked like a children's tablet. It didn't look filthy. It just looked like a children's tablet. So I thought it was filthy. I just interpreted it as a filthy thing because it looked like a children's tablet.
You're talking hospitals. You're talking ERs.
Right.
You're talking,
it's a
really
retail thing that was handed to 100 people a day.
Exactly. And when COVID hit, and the customers that we had the utilization of personal devices just skyrocketed, as you can probably imagine. Well, some of it was they could text it to you while you're sitting in your car waiting to go in.
Oh,
you know,
nice.
which
Okay.
was a huge
Yeah,
leap.
so reduce the foot traffic.
But I mean, so many people said, "Do I have to touch
Yeah,
that
COVID or
thing?"
not, who cares? I don't want that kid's boogers on my hands. You know what I mean?
Well, but you know, and not to be disgusting, but I'll just say, in an ER, boogers would be some of the
The
things
least
you wish
concern,
were
right?
on there.
Right.
So, and that's a huge thing that, you know, you can use your own device. It's yours. You know what you're doing, even if it's a smaller footprint, which, you know, I mean,
True.
you fill out an 8.5 by 11 form.
I don't care
you
because
know,
I can one
over
thumb
and
it on my
over
phone.
and over again.
Right.
Yeah, you can scroll.
While I'm listening to music on my phone, right? I'm spoiled over here, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can, you know, they can fill it out on their own device. They can do that. They don't have to.
And I had a personal experience with that just recently because I just kind of picked these things up.
Yeah.
And when they handed me that thing, it occurred to me that like how much cooler that was that I didn't have to like sit at a kiosk or even do that on,
Yeah.
man. And how quickly it went from like I would have celebrated that over paper not that
Yeah.
long ago. And that they started to hand me that, and I was like, "Oh, there's probably macaroni." And, like it just said to me, "Macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You've
And I was
got
like,
kids.
So to be able to do it on my phone while I continued to listen to the podcast I was listening to
Yeah.
or whatever,
It's a really neat product line, and there's a lot of benefits
that's awesome.
that we can get to our customers that are using it. So I like that one a lot.
So what's the third one you guys are building?
So the third one's a lot closer to kind of the traditional Taylor world of print, and we call it document automation, and it's really a suite of different products. All of them at the 100,000 foot level take in data, manipulate the data, and are able to produce output.
So you kind of got a theme in terms of what you build.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Forms on Demand is the biggest product that we have in this space. And we, again, sell it to the acute care systems. All of the patient data, mainly, you know, the demographic information from all the different hospital systems. And we save it into our system, and we let people log in and pick a patient, pick a form, pick a printer, and print it. And that sounds so simple, and it is so complex. We profile every printer inside of the facility so that we know what materials are in what drawers, so that if you go to print a wristband, you're not printing it on 8.5 by 11 black, you know, white paper. You're printing it on a label sheet. If you want to print a thermal label, you know, we can drive the thermal printers. So we have all of that kind of logic bit into it.
So if you're printing it on a sticker or a piece of plastic and a patient's name or a serial number or whatever else, you're able to grab all of that kind of granular data.
Yeah, we grab
to a particular device.
Exactly.
That's pretty swift.
And then we've got a rules engine that our implementation team can basically customize the data parsing and then write rules so that we can automatically print things. This doesn't happen as much anymore as things go more and more into the electronic world. Paper's still there. I mean, people are shocked. We do a hospital implementation, and each hospital, not each hospital system, each hospital will have 1,000 to 1,500 forms that we have to build into the Forms on Demand application. Wow. What we would do a lot of, especially early on, is we use that rules engine so that you get registered as an inpatient for knee replacement surgery, and you're on Medicare. Okay. So in the registration department, you know, again, before check-in, we would print out all of those forms that you needed to get on your clipboard. We would print out the wristband and a label sheet and all of the documentation that the registration person would need in order to kind of get you moving through the process. Up on the floor, we'd use the information we got to determine where you were getting admitted to. We'd print out at that printer where the unit clerk was or the nurse was and print out the information necessary to start your medical chart. And then down in the financial services division, we'd print out whatever they needed in order to start your financial aspect, in order to do an insurance check and everything else, all driven by the admissions and, you know, the type of admission. And, oh, you're a Medicaid patient. You also need the important message from Medicare and this additional Medicare form to sign and, you know, those types of things. So that core rules engine and everything is still there and gets used by a lot of people. And again, you think, okay, Dan, you know, printing, great, you know, how exciting is that? Well, we print the wristband and go to and have any major procedure and get a wristband. They don't do anything until they scan that wristband.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't open your body without looking at that thing, right?
Well, and, you know, depending on the different facilities, they have handled this in different ways, but they can't give you medication. Typically, they can't use supplies
Yeah.
until they have a wristband.
Yeah.
And, and it's not just a accounting thing to make sure they're charging you for everything. There's also a safety thing. All those medication systems use that wristband information to say, are there medication interactions? Have you already received this dose? I want to put a reminder for the nurse to give you that medication again later on.
So what?
All driven off those numbers that they read off the wristband.
So, sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
My heart skipped a beat a little bit there as I thought about what level of responsibility do you have in that? How much is your head in that news?
If you're talking about legal liability, there's not a lot there because what we do is a lot of the times we use, let's say, different tricks. People have different ways to make that barcode that's on the wristband unique. We have to make sure what we print is what we get sent. And that's kind of where our liability, again, legally ends.
Right. So you have some level of assurance there.
Right.
But they have some skin in the game too, right?
Right. They have to make sure that what they're sending us is accurate and is correct.
Some shared risk then.
Exactly. And then there's typically another vendor for that medication system, and they have to have responsibility for after they read it, are they looking up the right patient? But if you really think about it, it all also boils down to ultimately that provider that is having that discussion again with you again. That's why they always come in and ask you for your name and your birthday.
Right. Are you Dan?
Are you Dan? And can you tell me
still
your birthday? Yeah. And you notice they don't say it like that. It's funny. They walk in and they act like they don't know you.
That's right. Who are you again?
Can you tell me your name and your birthday before they say anything
That's right. They don't
else?
prompt you.
Exactly.
That's true.
And they compare it to what's on the wristband and what's in the medical system. They have a responsibility to confirm your identity in at least two different ways. But the wristband, again, is kind of that foundational piece for a lot of those things. And then a lot of what we produce out of Forms on Demand now, as people have moved more and more into the electronic world, it's taken a different twist. We produce anything that's patient-facing, any education materials. So, you get discharged and you get that big fat packet of information after being in the hospital a while. All of that can come out of Forms on Demand, all those education pieces and everything else.
Okay.
And complement what comes out of the medical record.
It can be kind of tailored to whatever your procedure or the recommendations they're sending home to you per your procedure.
They can pull all of those different individual procedures and different combinations of things.
Yeah.
And they can send that information, printed in a packet and given to you. That happens a lot. The other thing that we do a whole lot of is in this world of reliance on the medical record and ransomware and cyber attacks, if someone attacks that EHR and takes it down, and that's a big target at a hospital if someone gets attacked.
Sure.
We have a copy of that. They can break the glass and they can start printing out all of those forms that they used to do manually in order to continue to provide care.
You guys have come a long way from printing checks.
Yes. We still do that too.
Right. I mean, you still do that. The traditional stuff, but man, you do some complex stuff now.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I said, pick a patient, pick a form, pick a printer, print it. And you go, okay, I got it. And then we get developers that, we bring in new and they look at it and they're like, this system's complex.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, there's a lot there.
Well, I mean, you say it, you hear it, I hear it every single day. I mean, sometimes the most important work that gets done in technology is making complex things simple. So if you say those things and you're like, oh, that's simple, it's because there's a pile of wires behind a closet somewhere.
Yes.
They're figuratively speaking. It's not literally a pile of wires, but a pile of code somewhere. It's very complex, making that a very simple experience for somebody. And, I got a form today regarding some follow-up on some healthcare thing, just as it should be.
Yeah.
And when it shows up just as it should be, with just the right information, it's a beautiful thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Oh, that's about me, and it's accurate, and it showed up at the right address at the right time.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And it wasn't written by hand by a nurse to me.
To me, about me. Yeah.
No, it was some automated thing as a follow-up or whatever, because somebody checked a couple of boxes or whatever. It's a brilliant thing. So the complexity behind the curtain, so to speak.
It's amazing how the complexity at a at a technology level, and then there's a complexity level at the human level as well to make it easy. You don't think about it, but like I said, 1,000 to 1,500 forms in each of our systems. Most of these hospital systems have forms committees. There's a legal representative and medical representatives and administrative representatives from all of the different departments, and then they have to be approve and edit all of those forms, and then they have to be revised. A new medical practice, comes in that, you're going to give aspirin within 30 minutes, not within 45 minutes of arrival in the ER for heart patients. Well, every form that has that recommendation on it needs to be updated. Every form needs to be identified. Again, the cool thing of moving from a pure paper world, which is what Taylor used to provide, right? Shipping boxes of paper to the hospital, to this forms on demand world, as you go in and you make that change once after the forms committee approves it, and it blasts out to everybody.
Yeah.
But 1,500 forms. I mean, can you imagine those people, how often they're meeting and reviewing and everything else?
Wild.
Yeah.
There's no liability of a nurse having some old form hidden in a drawer somewhere.
Exactly.
With the old protocol, right? And the old
exactly.
recommendation on it that's not approved, and that being pulled out a year later and used when it shouldn't be.
That happened all the time.
Sure. And creating all kinds of liability for that hospital, and maybe bad recommendations for a patient. Right?
Absolutely. And bad outcomes for everyone. Inside of that document automation space, there's other activities, and that forms committee is a good example. We have a forms approval workflow, and we automate that review process and approval process, and then feed it into forms on demand. For the 10, 15 people that need to look at a form, someone can submit a recommendation for a change. It goes to the person that needs to make the change on the form. It then gets routed to all the different people. When it gets approved, it gets sent to the test environment where they can test it. It then gets approved, and it then gets promoted into the production environment and can automatically be used and gone elsewhere. We have other document automation applications. Another one we're working on now, again, it sounds so simple, but is ColorRx. And there's these great now color thermal printers out there, and we're working with a customer now building out the next version of it. And if you think about in a hospital an IV bag, and you get your typical kind of black and white label that's got, this is the medication, this is the patient, this is the dose, and then they slap labels on there like this is a pediatric dose, or this is a chemo drug, it's got a radioactive component to it, or after you give this person's a fall risk because it can mess with their ability to balance and equal. Thank you, I couldn't think of the right word. Their equilibrium. What the ColorRx application does is similar to FOD. We get the data. So we get the data from the pharmacy system, and then we can either use the triggers that they put in there to say, this is a pediatric dose, this can mess with someone's equilibrium, add the fall risk. And instead of relying on somebody after that IV label has been printed to put it on the bag and then apply all those color stickers to it, when that label comes out, it's got best practice labels already printed on it. It's got the color on there. They put that one thing on there and they're done and they can move on. Making the complex simple.
Yeah, it just kind of expedites the identification of a couple of critical identifiers.
Absolutely.
So that the healthcare worker is more quickly communicated to.
Exactly.
Again, you guys are a communications company, so
it's
just
all about
creating
facilitating
more
the communications.
Yeah.
When I say, we're a portfolio company and we kind of have to balance everything, we've got our informed consent, IMED consent, our Checkin, and our document automation groups, and they're all building those communication products, but, it's all kind of running almost as independent little teams and organizations inside of my group.
Has any marketing exec at Taylor ever tinkered with the idea of leveraging the tailored name as a way of saying it's tailored communication or whatever, as a gimmick for branding?
Since Taylor acquired Standard Register, and since a lot of the people listening to this know Dayton,
the local branch,
Standard Register, when we were acquired by Taylor, they went through a lot of different branding activities. And before that, there wasn't a lot of Taylor branding.
Okay.
It was a bunch of 80 different independent companies.
Oh, so the Taylor brand is kind of new.
And the Taylor brand is, relatively new.
It just occurred to me that as a communications company, and a lot of the communication is about unique identifying
Yeah.
communication, the nuanced communication, the tailored communication.
Communications.
So
It
just
sure
occurred to me,
does
like,
come.
you guys are
Yeah.
about tailoring the communication.
I
Anyway, that
haven't
one's free,
heard-
Dan.
I was gonna
Run that
say-
one up the pole. I won't even bill you for
I
it.
haven't heard that one, but yeah, that one's definitely going into the bucket.
That's some MBA knowledge right there.
yeah.
Thanks,
Next-
Wright State.
Yeah.
Professor Gupta, I think my marketing professor. Anyway.
The next time
That's
I'm in
cheeseball stuff. That's probably not going to make the.
Oh no, it'll
cutouts.
make the list. Whether it makes the end goal is.
I don't know if it'll make the snippets for the social
Yeah.
media posts. So I'm curious a little bit about your background with
Yeah.
Taylor. How long have you been with them? Quite a while, right? You're kind of a long term.
I started with Standard Register in '99. I worked in software development. Product I worked on was check processing and talk about old technology, getting bills and checks in the mail,
Yeah.
and running them through.
Oh,
a
so
machine.
my memory of Standard being a check company is accurate.
It's
Okay.
very, very accurate.
Okay.
Standard Register held, I'm going to get the numbers wrong. I haven't had to talk about it in a long time, but I want to say hundreds of patents in document security, mainly around checks.
So I thought I knew somebody.
yeah.
I thought I had some friends that were in that space.
Yes,
So
yeah,
it's interesting.
absolutely.
So I didn't make that up.
No,
I thought I
you
had.
didn't make that up. So I started there. I worked in that space for about 5 years. The first half on the check thing, and then the second half I started working in healthcare. I ended up leading a small, project managing a small team of developers in building new versions of products.
Okay.
I went over and I went to manage the support group
Okay.
for that same organization,
Okay.
working with customers to support the software that I used to write. The thing that helped me career-wise was that move. When I went from hands-on keyboards and coordinating work, I didn't know how to do what the people that worked for me did. I had to learn how to work with them and work through them and get things done and started doing it myself. And
There's a lot to be said for deference to the experts that you're leading.
Yeah.
And the humbling experience that has on a leader. And I think the experience of a leader who has to say, I'm completely dependent on the expertise of the people that what it does for a leader is it puts you in your place. It makes you recognize that you work for them.
You hear the corny servant leadership
Right.
thing, and it really is true. The more you move up in the organization, I've found the less you need to be the center of attention and the more you need to be about how do I help people get stuff done. I mean, so much of what I do is providing context to people that work for me to understand, like this story of informed consent.
That's right.
You can't forget that the product that you're working on is about helping a patient understand a procedure that, frankly, they're probably terrified to about have.
Yeah.
They're worried about their health. Somebody's going to go in and spend hours cutting open their body. Our job is to help make that better.
That's right. You're taking the corner off
just
of
a little bit
of a big route that
Right.
they're running.
Right. And then, in other areas, it's, hey, remember, we're here to make people's lives easier, to make the registration process easier, to make the process of getting the forms put together for a patient, for a nurse who's running around pulling her hair out all day easier.
Right.
When you can provide that context and help people understand that's really that leadership role.
Yeah.
And I mean, normally I can hang in the technical conversations, especially at the architecture level. I have opinions, and the guys if the people that work for me listen to this, they'll probably laugh when I say I have opinions.
His opinions.
Yeah, exactly. Rolling their eyes. But, I kind of think, it is one of those things where you sit there and you say, they're better at this than I am.
Sure.
They deal with it all day, every day.
Right.
And, what can I do in order to help them be better? Like you said, I really learned that support phase, when I managed that team. The other thing that did for me that was phenomenal was I had to learn how to talk to customers, and not happy customers.
Dude, slinging plates. We talked about it earlier. I learned that first there, and I'll never forget those lessons.
You get somebody that calls you up and they can't print payroll.
Wow.
And it's your software's fault.
Oh, man.
I dealt with a lot of those. The one I will
As a small business person,
Yeah.
if my dudes didn't get paid, my dudes and dudettes did not get paid,
Yeah.
and I'm talking to the guy whose fault it is,
Yeah.
oh man, his collar's on fire.
Yes, it is. I will never forget. I got a call from a a large newspaper. And this was years ago when most people got paid with a physical check. You know, we were doing deposit advices, but most people got paid with a physical check.
Okay.
And they forgot to back up their system that produced the checks.
Oh,
and
wow.
they lost their system. I mean, like totally dead.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we're starting from scratch, calling people up going, do you happen to have so-and-so's configuration? He gets on the phone with me and he's like, you need to get this fixed. And, you know, and I'm like, we're doing everything we can. Do you guys have a backup? You know, I mean, you know, this is a shared responsibility thing. This isn't just me.
How deep is the water we're in right here?
And I was on speakerphone and all of a sudden I'm not. And it's him. He goes, look, you gotta figure this out. He's like,
oh, no.
We're a union shop. If checks don't go out tomorrow, we're not delivering newspapers this weekend or anything until you deliver those checks.
Oh, wow.
You'd know the company if I said it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You know.
I know.
I mean,
I knew it as soon as you said it.
that scale of, oh, no. And I will say,
Bigger
not
than
in
that?
Ohio.
Bigger than that? Oh, no. Wow.
And, you know, I will say it was humbling when I hung up that phone and I realized just how critical those systems were. And again, huge growth for me.
So when I asked you where you got your MBA, because I could hear the business savvy in our conversation yesterday, and you said, oh, not from my MBA. That's where you got it.
Well,
talking to business owners about the missing their payroll and the implications of their staff. You know, like
I heard it there.
It's talking to customers.
Right. Well, I got my MBA from the University of Dayton.
Mm-hmm. But that's not where
that's
you got
where
your
I got
business
my
savvy.
undergrad.
You got your business savvy from talking to customers, right? Running their businesses and meeting payroll. And
I did that for about a year and a half. And then I went into product management. And that's where I think it really flipped.
It really clicked for you.
I had some great mentors, Phil Ledoux, Doug Birchfield, Brad Cates. When I was in that product management organization, I was able to learn from just some people that really know how to run businesses. My job in product management, a lot of people think of product manager and think backlog, think requirements, but the way we ran things, it was you were responsible for the whole program. And by that, I mean, when we came up with a new idea for a product, I had to write the business case for it, which the MBA was awesome. You know, I mean, that gave me the foundation, the conceptual knowledge. But then, you know, talking to those guys, you know, we had to come up with, here's the revenue, here's roughly what the costs are going to look like, here's what the profit looks like in the end. Being able to think about what kind of sales incentives do you want to have? Because I would do it too if I were in sales, right? You're going to sell what resonates with your customers, and that tends to be the easiest thing to do, and that tends to be the thing that you know the best, and that tends to be the thing that you've got hundreds of installs on. So when you launch a new product, if you want anybody to talk to a customer about it, you got to find a new customer, and you got to be able to say, here's a lighthouse account, here's somebody that every one of your potential customers are going to know.
Right.
Talk about their implementation. You've got to personally incent them to invest the time to learn about the product and not go out and talk to help customers with the thing that they know and they've done 100 times. So you've got to think about those aspects and the financial implications. You know, you put spiffs on, you know, a new product, you do a higher commission rate or something in order to encourage people to sell it for a while. And then you bring it down to normal, right?
Yep.
So I learned about that. And then you have to think about, what's the contract look like? Writing a contract. What's the marketing material look like? Talking to marketing about email campaigns and brochures and, you know, what's the first PowerPoint? What's the demo look like? You had to think about that whole process and walk through that and not necessarily do it, but my responsibility was to work with the different departments, do a lot of it, but work with them in order to get it done. So like I said, you get the contract, you get the pricing. When I sell one of these, what services are included? And again, you know, that you can tell I've worked in medium-sized groups my career, right? You can't go out the door and say, hey, I got this new product, and you know, somebody says, great, you know, and negotiate the price on the fly because you built it, you know it. You've got to come up with, this is what we're going to offer it. Again, you know, working through people, you know, the salesperson is going to have to be able to do a back of napkin price and have to explain, you know, what it includes. Justify it. Right. not only a value prop, but like when somebody says, okay, great, if I do that, can I interface to my 4 EHRs?
Right.
Or is that just one?
Mm-hmm.
Again, think of the forms. Is
Right. You're
that
going to have to presume some answers.
one
Right?
form? Is that 1,500 forms? Well, somebody's got to define that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my job when I was in product management. We called it defining the box. And it's not that we're trying to contain anybody, but just when you're talking to somebody, if you're outside of the box, your job is to raise your hand and come back and say, I got somebody that wants to do X. How do we do this? Is that inside the box or is that out? So I did that in product management. And then I got an opportunity to move back into development, manage a team of developers. When I took over, I want to say it was about 8, but we'll just say 5 to 10 people, all software developers. And, we were building a product. Luckily, slowly over the years, I helped acquire a company, and then that development group ended up folding under my responsibilities. Taylor acquired another company. We got that development organization. We've decided to make some strategic investments, and the group has slowly grown, to where it is now. And then when we started hosting things, I got responsibility for the hosting operations and DevOps, and that's kind of grown
this
into
is
where
what
I am
happens,
today.
Dan. You keep showing up and delivering, and they keep asking you to do more.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll admit, I couldn't do what I do today if it wasn't for the awesome team I have.
And I know one of your leaders, Dan,
Dave Hoskins.
who introduced us. And so I know at least one good guy that you have on your team. And I think having good people on your team is critical. And he's had tremendous responsibility before.
Oh, he's had tremendous
he's
responsibility.
He's capable of a ton. And when you have people who can lift a ton, you never have to worry about stuff being dropped. It's really easy to spin a lot of plates.
Oh,
right?
It's
you always know you have bandwidth, and
you always know you have bandwidth. You always know when that your boss comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, can you help out with could you take this on?" Give me a couple days. I got to juggle some things, but we can take on this new major thing. Yeah. And the thing is I was laughing with you about listening to podcasts. I love the Manager Tools podcast and the Manager Tools philosophy. And
I'm not familiar with it. I'll check it out.
Yeah, they call it the Management Trinity. That you do one-on-ones, delegation, coaching, and feedback. And yes, it's a trinity of 4, but that's part of the joke of it.
Okay.
But the delegation thing is what I learned inherently, but especially learned how to kind of operationalize through them, so to speak, is you got to always look for opportunities to stretch the people that work for you and to give them more. And it's funny, at times it's almost uncomfortable because you're like, I have capacity, I can do more. You're doing it right when you're giving people more and more responsibility and coaching them and helping them grow. And then all of a sudden, somebody taps you and says, hey, I got this huge rock I need you to take, and you've got a big rock, and you can go, well, I got some great folks that are working for me. I know I can lean on them a little bit more. I can ask, them to take a little bit more of the strategic planning and, road mapping. And I can ask them to do a little bit more of requirements instead of me personally being involved in it. And I've slowly grown that group from those 8 people to now we're 80.
Yeah.
Across around
That's
the
really
world.
Fun.
So
I've done a scale up at about that range from about 12 to close to about 80. It's a huge difference. It's a completely different body of people. The scale, just the number, because then you're managing managers.
I am naturally an introvert, which may not come out in something like this, but you give me my choice and I will probably retreat into the Excel spreadsheets and the PowerPoint slides and everything else, right?
Video game happy hour, which are you taking? Right?
Yeah. And but what I've had to do is I systemize some things in order to force myself to have different communications and different processes. And frankly, that's what turned me on to Manager Tools, as they talk about the one-on-ones, how to do them and what they do. And that was the best thing I ever did. For communications and status, I make my leaders, the managers and the managers, submit to me a status on all their different projects every week. And it sounds so silly. It's, here's the format, here's the major milestones, red, yellow, green, how we doing? What have we accomplished? It sounds like administrative, roll your eyes, stuff. What I learned is when I had 8 people, I used to walk out of my cube and I'd look around the room. and I'd be like, Visual Studio's up, coding heads down, headphones are on,
Right.
testing, they're on Stack Overflow, great, they're learning something new. Why are they on YouTube? Why are they on, and next day you kind of do the same thing and they're still over on YouTube, and you knew the status of the project.
Just
you
some
could
informal
go,
curiosity was kind of
they
sufficient.
could go and say, "Oh, what are you working on? How's it going?"
Sure.
"Oh, well, I'm kind of done with what I wrapped up."
Right.
Great.
Right.
You got to systemize it. You got to say,
Right.
how do you measure productivity? How do you measure progress? And
particularly as your team disperses and becomes
and you get more remote. You can't
right.
look around the room anymore. You
worthless.
got to exactly.
Right.
And we slowly adopted, with everyone with Agile, right? But especially with a group this size, breaking down tickets into tasks and user stories, and like I said, those weekly reports, and reporting your time, and all of those big corp things that people roll their eyes at, but they're a huge help in
consistency and predictability sometimes creates a little comfort too.
Yes.
And there's something to be said for the longevity of the team that you've put together. I mean, it's really hard to argue with people that have been in an organization for lots of people who have been in an organization for decades, which you can boast about, and I'm impressed with.
Yes, we have.
So nobody's over here criticizing. We should be taking notes.
No.
So whatever red green status, whatever. Like your guys are lasting. So I'm over here taking notes. I'm not criticizing. I like what you're doing.
Again, I have great people. I'm blessed with longevity of the team, and people that are committed. I think a lot of it is we do invest in our people and grow our people. My story at Taylor is not uncommon. You hear a lot of people that started off, fresh out of college or soon after, and slowly got more responsibility and were able to find their niche. You tend to, rarely do you have what else, a bad employee.
Yeah.
You typically have them in the wrong role.
I want to dig into that, and if you don't mind, I'm going to change the subject to one more thing I want to talk about before I let you go.
Okay.
If you don't mind me
kind
of controlling the subject matter.
You're a podcast,
right? Because I do kind of I always like to talk at the end about what's next.
Yeah.
And I know you're a little bit of a forward thinker.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit yesterday about the Boston box and how you intentionally, and you just alluded to a lot of times about people staying.
Yeah.
And we talked yesterday about how sometimes people want to do something different. You do budget a little bit of the time and attention on your team for people to invest in and building speculative things.
Yeah.
So can we talk about that a little bit? And then kind of the subject matter I wanted to talk about is your organization and what's next for you. I'm curious about like the next year and a half, 2 years, and what you're looking forward to, what challenges are ahead, and what opportunities you're seeing.
So, boy, that's
a big one,
question.
Like, what do you see for the next year or 2 years?
Yeah. So I'll start with, I alluded to it, the Boston box, you mentioned that. So I said, we're a portfolio company, and I kind of described the different tiers, but inside of that, what we try to do is, if you look at a single product company, again, theoretical MBA stuff, but it's real world. You start small and you kind of move up, and then you grow and you stay big, and then eventually you decline, and your product goes away.
Yeah.
So if you're a single product company, that's what your company does.
Sure.
So what we try to do is we try to have products at each different of the phases of those. And the traditional MBA tool to visualize that is the Boston box. And it's a simple tool, but it's really powerful in that you look kind of left to right, your place in the market or how big it is, and up and down how much you're investing in the product. If you think about it, that kind of top right quadrant are your bets. They call them your question marks. I'm pouring money into these things, but there's a huge market opportunity, but I don't have a big piece of the market right now. Right? Inherently, I'm making a bet. And you got to make small, medium, and large bets, right? But we try to continually to do those. You want a lot of that, right? And then you've got the things that are a lot of people think of, especially in an environment like this, being built, this is where it's fun. You're growing, right?
That's right.
You're adding new capabilities of the product. You're gaining lots of new customers. Your revenue's taking off. You're kind of on that upswing.
Yeah,
right?
you're close to the peak. You're
Exactly.
You're getting there.
You're getting there. You're making money and you're doing well, but you don't quite know when you're going to cap out. You want to make sure you continue to move that on. In that environment, the Boston Box, they call those your stars because they're rising stars, right? And then there's the piece where what people don't realize, where you really make your money as a business, is when they actually stop that growth. When you've got all the core functionality all your customers needs, or most of it,
Just boring and bagging cash.
You got a huge customer base, and what you're doing then in the technology world is you're keeping things modern. Yeah. You're adding capabilities that make your customers happy and are making it easier for them to use, and those are your cash cows, and that's where you're making money in order to invest more in those future bets. And again, if I had a whiteboard, I'd be all over it right now. But
maybe, hey, Emerson, why don't you throw in a Boston box? We'll throw in a Boston box.
But you've got that one graph, of one company. If you overlay a bunch of them, you can envision that top line of everything added together ends up for a smooth rising, steady cash flow revenue stream. So we inherently have done that at Taylor and Standard Register and Taylor Healthcare since I started. Okay. And, it was just how they ran the company. They didn't have the mechanics or they didn't define it as the Boston Box. They had the mechanics of it. That's just intuitively doing it. And then I had my MBA and I was learning about this, and I'm like, this is what we do every day.
You just had a business owner and acquirer who had been doing it intuitively, who was then hiring educated people and recognizing what he was doing
it as well,
and put acronyms on it.
Exactly.
And said, hey, can we operationalize this for you?
I bet if you ask the upper people at Standard Register and at Taylor Healthcare and at Taylor, when I joined, somebody would have said, well, yeah, we're a portfolio company. It's the Boston Box. Right. But it really clicked when I was in that product management role, getting the MBA. But anyway, so we do that kind of investment.
That's good.
And back to people and investment, what that means is that people put their heart and soul into what they build when they're in technology. I mean, we laugh, it's your baby. And you do a demo and somebody calls your baby ugly, and it hurts, right?
Sure.
But so it really is their baby. And I have a lot of people that do that. But what we do as a group is, over the years, we'll move people into different products because their skill set's there. You can take a budding, project lead or manager and give them one of those bets, one of those question marks, and have them run it. And then they grow as a manager with the product. And, you got somebody that you think can be an architect. We don't want to take your architect off of your largest growth product in order to make a small bet.
Okay.
But boy, you can take a senior developer and give them an opportunity to do a architecture, role. Okay. And so we do a lot of that, in order to help grow people. I alluded to the fact that, everybody on my team it tracks their time. And I do that to be able to talk about where we're investing and how much and everything else. Sense. But one of the key things that I do is I measure my managers, and my managers include in their individual performance reviews a commitment to spend, depending on the role, 3 to 10% of their time on self-development.
Okay. Interesting.
You want an architect to have the freedom to be out reading about what's coming, not just heads down, buried in what's today, but, where are we going? What's going on? When Azure was first coming out, you want somebody reading and learning to know what's coming.
Let me ask you something. What's one of the things you're most concerned about as far as what's coming, the next year or two?
I wouldn't say concerned, but I am fascinated with AI and where things are going there. I think it's going to have a profound impact across the board, not just on what we do. Like, I'm not looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, they're taking our jobs, right? But like, what is it called? GitHub Copilot. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's...
I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
So it's Microsoft's, through GitHub's AI tool, is basically a pair programmer through AI.
Interesting.
I mean, one of the guys that I had that looked at it said it's IntelliSense on steroids. You can write a high level requirement and it will put in the framework for your code for the function that you're about to write. It'll do the typical IntelliSense stuff, but so it'll make developers that much more productive. Let them focus on solving the problems instead of the mundane stuff.
Get you set up faster, working on the nuance quicker.
Absolutely. It'll help those entry level people skip the kind of one-on-one or 101 code review things.
Well, there was a time in the history of development where we were, coding in ones and zeros.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so at some point we thought, oh, we're not coding ones and zeros anymore. There's not going to be need for software developers anymore. It's all going to be modular now. Yeah. And it's going away. And it's not true. It multiplied.
Exactly.
Right? And so everybody thinks, oh, everything's going to be automated now. So they're just going to go away. Well, that's not true.
No.
The need for things to be automated with software is the need so outpaces the demand for things that could be produced via software. I think we're just a long, long, long way away from all those jobs going away.
I agree.
It's just
completely.
there are so many more that will be created. The nature of them will just change. They will be much more nuanced.
Yes. And I mean, I was going on and on about Copilot, but that's a great example of making people more productive, right?
That's right.
And I see that
productive in a more nuanced way.
Exactly. I see that coming down the pike in healthcare. You've got a lot of startups and a lot of, bets that people are making with AI in order to help complement the physician, summarize medical records, do all these types of things. And I'm intrigued by that. And I don't know exactly where that's going to come with our communication and with our portfolio. We've had some high level conversations about some different things that, we potentially could be getting into. But I see, frankly, in the next few years that AI is just going to come down and it's really going to change things. It's going to change things in the way the internet changed things.
Right. Fast-paced, unpredictable.
Exactly. Fast-paced, unpredictable. One of the things that I would sit here and say is, I'm encouraging people to just learn.
Yeah, right. Indulge so that you can be part of what happens.
Right.
However it happens, because it's really hard to see what's going to happen in the next 2 years. As you think about that as a challenge and maybe some other things that are your team is facing, that your challenges that you guys are kind of taking on over the next year or two, what are some things that you're doing to kind of mitigate that challenge and others so that you're prepared to succeed and win over the next year or two?
Right. For me personally, right? Not for Taylor Healthcare, but for me, it's all about the people development and continuing to make sure that we're giving people the room to grow and giving the people to expand. Like I said, does everybody have a self-development goal? And are they actually working on it? And then, for people in, product owner, business analyst kind of roles, right?
That's a really high trust answer.
Well,
I really like that. Yeah. That's a leadership answer. Yeah. That's not a technical answer at all. You didn't say, well, we're investing in X, Y, and Z. Yeah. You just said, I want to make sure my team has bandwidth to invest in themselves.
On the one hand, I say that and I'm like, I feel like I'm punting. Because you're
deferring to
deferring to the expert,
to your team to know what they need to invest in, right? And your leaders to know what their team needs to invest in.
And that's where we spend time. We do continuity planning, succession planning, and we talk about everybody's self-development. We do quarterly check-ins with everybody that reports to me and about their goals.
Yeah.
And how are we doing on all of these things? Not a performance review, but just a genuine conversation about how things are going so that they can adjust. And inevitably, the biggest discussion point ends up being, what are you doing to self-develop? What are you doing with your team to self-develop and grow? And, those are the areas where the architects, the developers, the QA people, the BAs, if you give them the bandwidth and you nudge them in the right direction, hey, we need somebody to look at AI and Copilot. Hey, a friend of mine said their boss suggested using ChatGPT to help write their goals at the beginning of the year. And at first it was like a joke. And then I was like, that's brilliant.
Right. Why not?
Why?
Just do it, draw what hurts.
But, I went in and I said, hey, what's a good self-development goal in .NET 6 for a developer with 6 years experience.
Yeah.
You know, and it spat out some stuff and we didn't use it, you
Yeah.
know, but I mean, we used it as a foundation to tweak it and to adjust it and then to have a conversation with that person about what they wanted to do.
Right.
But then that manager and I both knew a little bit more about AI and about what was coming. It's those types of things. It's those room to grow, those opportunities to develop that I think are really where we're going to be able to meet the challenges that technology brings.
Yeah.
You know, as an organization, you know, where are we going and what are we doing?
Yeah.
That's where, you know, me working with the rest of the executive team and the product management group, like you said, it's really hard to predict where this stuff is going. Just like when, you know, the internet was coming. It's those types of things that I think are tough work that, you know, it's got to be smart people in a room to talk through.
Yeah. I appreciate you being here in this conversation. It was brilliant, insightful. Thanks for making the second trip due to our technical difficulties.
Hey, no problem.
Thank you, Dan.
Hey,
appreciate
thanks
you being
a
on the
lot.
show.
It was a lot of fun.
All right, man.